Can Zhen Huan, blessed with both beauty and talent, truly outshine all in the imperial harem and enjoy everlasting favor? The table was laden with fine wines and delicacies, fresh vegetables and wild game. A gentle breeze wafted through the curtains, and the soft music of the guzheng filled the air, creating a relaxing and enjoyable atmosphere. Pear Blossom white wine was sweet and mellow, but it packed a punch. After 3 rounds of drinks, my face felt hot, and my head began to spin. Seeing everyone enjoying themselves, I excused myself and quietly pulled Lu Zhu away to change clothes and sober up. Huan Bai had earlier instructed Jingqing and Pei to prepare a change of clothes in a small pavilion next to Fuli Hall. Although Fuli Hall was cooler than other places, the first birthday celebration of Princess Wen Yi was a grand event. Although it was not necessary to dress formally according to rank, one still had to wear clothes that conformed to the regulations. Moreover, with the warmth of the wine and the heat, my undergarments were soaked with sweat and uncomfortably sticky. The pavilion was fully equipped, designated for the empress and concubines to change clothes and sober up. Seeing me enter, Jingqing and Pei hurried over to fan me and offer water. I took a damp handkerchief and pressed it to my face, saying, "This weather is strange to be so hot in June." Jingqing laughed along and said, "It's no wonder the young master is sweating so much with all the entertaining of the palace ladies and noblewomen." I chuckled lightly and said, "Where do I need to entertain? Today is Shenronghua and Chao Jieyu's big day. We just need to sit back, enjoy the drinks, and listen to the music." Jingqing laughed and said, "No wonder the young master didn't dress up extravagantly today." I took a sip of tea and said, "Today's grand feast is centered around Shenronghua and Chao Jieyu. It's their time to shine. When it's not our turn to stand out, we should keep a low profile to avoid attracting trouble. Sometimes, being still is better than making a move." Pei, while helping me change, chimed in, "But how can one avoid trouble in the palace if it's meant to find you?" I glanced at her sideways without responding. Huan Bai took over the conversation, saying, "If trouble can't be avoided, one must hold back for the time being and wait for the opportunity to make an unexpected move to win by surprise. Isn't that right, miss?" I smiled and said, "You've learned quite a bit during your time here in the palace with me." Huan Bai smiled modestly and said, "Thank you for the compliment, miss." After changing into a light purple palace outfit, Huan Bai asked, "Does the miss wish to return to the banquet immediately?" I thought for a moment and then said with a smile, "You stay here." It was not easy to slip away from the banquet, and if I go back now, I'll inevitably have to drink more. My chest feels stuffy, so I might as well take a walk to clear my mind and sober up. Saying this, I took Lu Zhu's hand and went out. Outside, the air was indeed more refreshing than inside the hall. The imperial garden was filled with centuries-old trees, vines, lush flowers and plants, and rugged rockeries, providing a cooler and more refreshing atmosphere than other places. At this time of year, the garden was verdant, but there weren't many flowers in bloom. The pomegranate flowers were still vibrant, while the magnolia flowers were at their peak, beginning to show signs of wilting. The deep purple hearts of the flowers had turned a dark black, like a heart turned to ash. Lu Zhu and I slowly admired the flowers and teased the birds, unknowingly wandering far. Feeling a slight fatigue in my legs, I suddenly came across a clear spring behind a rockery, crystal clear to the bottom, looking cool and inviting. The area was quiet and deserted. Seized by a playful impulse, I took off my embroidered shoes and handed them to Lu Zhu, then lifted my skirt and dipped my feet into the cool and refreshing spring to play in the water. Several red fish swam around, lightly nibbling at my calves, tickling me and making me laugh out loud. Lu Zhu chuckled and said, "Miss is still the same as always, just like when you were in your family home. You haven't changed a bit." I kicked a splash of water and gave a bitter smile. "Where am I the same as before? I've changed a lot. Even with my current temperament, I've suffered a lot, both openly and secretly." Seeing Lu Zhu look embarrassed, I quickly laughed and said, "Look at me rambling after a few cups of wine. I'm just jesting with you." Lu Zhu said, "I understand perfectly. From the time you were favored to now, Miss has never really had a moment of relief." I patted her hand and said, "Why talk about such disheartening things now? With Sister Mei Zhuang's good news, at least I have some support. Let's not dwell on these unhappy topics." I turned and smiled. The water is quite refreshing. Are you coming in? As we were talking, I suddenly heard a slow voice reciting from afar. A whirl of clouds, a shuttle of jade. I thought to myself, these are the words of Emperor Liu of the Southern Tang dynasty. When Liu first met Empress Zhou, he recited new verses, and she played the pipa and danced the rainbow feather dress. A time of deep affection and dreamlike joy. It's just a pity that Liu, being an emperor and doting on Empress Zhou to such an extent, also had a little Empress Zhou, whom he asked to carry the gold-threaded shoes, indulging the young man's affection. I shook my head silently, thinking of Xianling under the apricot blossoms on that spring day, how he had deliberately kept his distance for fear of alienating me, and said with a smile, "I am Prince Qinghe." If life were only like the first encounter, why would the west wind lament the painted fan? Casual changes turn an old friend's heart, yet people say the old friend's heart changes easily. Xianling was gentle and elegant that day, but now he too might have grown suspicious of me due to others' instigations. I sighed softly, wishing life could always be like that first meeting. Lost in thought, I didn't notice the voice getting closer. Suddenly, a strong scent of intoxicating cool wine hit me, the sweet aroma of rose drunk. A fine wine from the western regions, mixed with the unfamiliar scent of a man, enveloping me. Startled, I slipped on the mossy ground and nearly fell into the spring. Lu Zhu couldn't grab me in time and cried out in alarm. "Miss!" Just as I was about to fall embarrassingly into the water, someone spun me around and pulled me up by the arm onto the shore. Before I could regain my composure, I heard him cheerfully say, "Why are you so light?" Startled and annoyed, I saw he was still holding my arm. With a strong push, I made him stagger backward and demanded, "Who are you?" Lu Zhu hurriedly stepped in front of me, scolding, "How dare you be so rude?" I looked up to see him leaning against a piece of snow-white Taihu rock, wearing a loose ink-splashed water-patterned white gauze robe with a purple flute casually placed at his waist, his demeanor lazy and relaxed. He wasn't annoyed by my push and didn't reply. Just staring at me for a moment, he squinted as if suddenly exposed to sunlight, unable to adjust. After examining me, his gaze fell to the ground, and a fleeting smile appeared on his lips. Emperor Liu once praised a beauty, saying her skin was as white as misty jade, soft enough to be cradled. Indeed, his words were not false. But I think misty jade, delicate and slender, describes you even better. Looking down, I realized he was staring at my bare feet, which I had forgotten to cover in my panic. My feet, pale against the green grass, looked like white lotus blossoms in bloom, subject to his scrutiny and appreciation. I felt both embarrassed and flustered, quickly covering my feet with my wide skirt. Traditionally, a woman's bare feet were considered highly private, only to be seen by her husband on their wedding night. Being seen like this by a stranger was acutely embarrassing. His flirtatious words only added to my irritation, and I sternly said, "Prince, please show some respect." Lu Zhu looked at me in surprise, whispering, "Miss." Ignoring her, I said coolly, "Lu Zhu, meet Prince Qinghe." Despite her confusion, Lu Zhu didn't dare to contradict me and bowed as instructed. Prince Qinghe chuckled lightly. "You haven't met me before. How do you know I am Prince Qinghe?" Maintaining a cool and distant smile, I countered. "Apart from Prince Qinghe, who else carries a purple flute at all times, has access to rose-drunk wine from the western regions, and can behave so freely and unconventionally in the palace? Who else could live up to the word unrestrained?" He appeared slightly surprised and said, "The prince has been impolite." Then he laughed heartily. "You are the emperor's new favorite?" I couldn't help but feel disdain for his unrestrained and imprudent manner of speaking. Seeing the awkward situation, Lu Zhu hurriedly intervened. "This is Zhen Wani." I nodded slightly, maintaining a superficial courtesy. "This concubine has offended the prince, please do not take it amiss." Not wanting to engage in further conversation, I bowed and said, "The emperor awaits this concubine, I must take my leave." Seeing me about to leave, he tried to stop me with a strong tug, but being heavily drunk, he staggered a few steps, unsteady on his feet. I said to Lu Zhu, "Summon 2 eunuchs to assist the prince to the nearby Songfeng pavilion to rest and sober up." Lu Zhu immediately called for the eunuchs, one on each side to support him. He waved his hand, his gaze falling on me. "What is your name?" I was taken aback, feeling even more embarrassed and annoyed. Asking for a name was a significant courtesy reserved for one's husband. As a consort of the emperor, only Xianling had the right to inquire my maiden name. I responded formally, "My humble name is not worthy of the prince's noble ears. The prince is drunk, please go and rest." With that I turned and left. Only when I had walked a good distance did I seriously say to Lu Zhu, "Not a word of today's events is to be mentioned to anyone, or I will have nowhere to hide, even in death." Lu Zhu had never seen me with such an expression and hurriedly nodded in agreement.
Follow us to avoid getting lost and enjoy endless exciting stories. For more content, please go to the Story Wall homepage to view more exciting novels.